at least on my list. Yes.
Okay, you're online.
So, greetings. Is it Gushy? Gushy. Thank you very much. I'm Martin Connolly. These are my colleagues, Councillor Maynard, Councillor Gray, Councillor Wright. And if you could come up to the top table.
Would you like me to sit here?
Yes, please. But the choice is. And so the next 5 minutes is over to you. I would suggest you assume we've read your submission and you highlight the things you really want to bang into our heads, but the 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Starting from now.
No, starting from when I push the button.
Starting from when you push the button.
Fire away.
I'll let you know before you push the button that I have written some notes which probably have even more detail in my submission, and I'm just going to read as fast as I can.
Go for it.
Right. My name is Fisher Shot. I was born in Carlton, where I live during the week, and I live at Watarangi, Palliser Bay on weekends. Driven since I was 15 in New Zealand, Australia and Europe for 55 years. Yes, I'm 70. I've got car, medium and heavy traffic licences. 2000 to 2019, I worked between the 15 schools in Carterton and South Wairarapa as an RTLB as far as Tutumuri School. That extended to Marsden and Upper Hutt. I did 10,000 Ks a year for my job, so 200,000 Ks on this road in my 20 years of service. I understand Waka Kotahi's goal. I've read both tech assessments for Carterton and yourselves, the interim speed management plan, and something called Waka Kotahi's high-risk rural roads guide. I offer my condolences to people who have lost loved ones to fatal crashes or suffered trauma through serious injury crashes in South Wairarapa, and I intend no disrespect in anything that I say. Context is, in South Wairarapa, you've had 8 fatalities over the 10-year period in the tech assessment. Combined with Carterton, you've had 70 serious injury crashes. Causes given have been alcohol, 26%, poor observation, 25%, poor handling, 37%, travel speed, 29%. My point is, travel speed is less than a third of the factors which have contributed to those 8 fatal and 70 serious injury crashes. And I'll pick that up if I have time at the end. My main reason for coming is to speak to the proposals for Ponatahi Road and Cape Palliser Road. Ponatahi Road is a rural connector. Speeds can be 60 to 100. It's a significant travel route between Martinborough and State Highway 2. Between State Highway 2, Marsden and Martinborough, and not just Martinborough, but your geographically huge rural hinterland. At 100 Ks now, it's a feasible and very attractive alternative to travelling on either of the state highways, particularly State Highway 2. For Marsden and urban commuters coming to work rurally in South Wairarapa, for South Wairarapa rural commuters travelling to Marsden for health, education, social services, as we know they have to do, tradies, freight, rural services and locals. And I'm going to say all these names because I think they all count. Tora, Tawai, Tutumuri, White Rock, Ruakok, Katuna side, Lake Ferry, Puranoa, Western Lake sides, Tāui, Watarangi, Tukopi, Wangamona side, Taumat and Ponatai. Please excuse my pronunciation because I'm speaking fast. It's a great local road alternative to State Highway 2. It's quite long, about 30 Ks if you go all the way from Martinborough through to Cornwall Road. You're looking at a bit of it, Carterton's looking at a bit of it. I'm going to talk about all of it. Neither of the tech assessments, in my opinion, gave consistent, common sense or any in-depth reasons why it can't continue as a 100K road. Carter's line, the Carterton tech assessment says high operating speed at 90 Ks, low medium risk because it's straight roads, marked centre line and edge posts. Their reason for reducing the speed is that will be consistent with the rural connector. I don't think, Kokotau Road, high operating speed 90 to 96 Ks, because it's straight roads, marked centre line and edge posts. The reasons they give for reducing does not meet the criteria for a different speed limit as outlined in the speed management plan. Reducing to 80 Ks is consistent with Carter's line. Thank you. Ponatahi Road, high operating speed 90 to 96, because most sections are relatively straight. The entire road has got centre line and edge marker posts. The reason for reducing there, it will be consistent with the rural connector, and this road does not meet the criteria for a different speed limit. Refer footnote 7. All footnote 7 is Waka Kotahi's driving safely plan. The faster you go, the bigger the crash. None of those reasons seem to me to be A, consistent, B, common sense, or C, in depth. From my experience, I believe that reducing this road speed will create a new safety hazard that no one even talks about, which is traffic congestion, leading to road rage, leading to more fatal and serious injury crashes on this road. I could explain that in way more detail if I had more time. I've done some maths about congestion. I understand neuroscience about how the brain works. Our frontal cortex stops operating when our primitive brain, gets into fight or flight, and I see it happening on State Highway 2 now. I think if you reduce it to 80 k's, you'll see congestion like on Martinborough Fair days. Wairarapa drivers are already feeling aggrieved at not being listened to by Waka Kotahi on the State Highway 2 speed limits, and for months driving at 30 k's on State Highway 2. Please let drivers have the dignity of driving decently. That means making decisions, driving to the conditions. Don't dumb them down and put them on the offensive. I've got 3 questions that I'd like you to consider. Some people drive. Is that my 5 minutes?
That is your 5 minutes, but why don't you, are they questions for us?
Yes, to ponder.
Okay, well, go for it.
Some people drive at unsafe and inappropriate speeds now with the limit at 100 k's. How will reducing the speed limit to 80 to 30? 2, how does reducing the road speeds mitigate the other 71% of factors that contributed to South Wairarapa's 8 fatal and 70 shared serious injury crashes? That's road, roadside, road user and vehicle factors. They're not even discussed in the picture. I understand this is about speed, but the 3rd question is there going to be a bigger picture discussion looking at those things? This high-risk rural roads guide has got really heaps of medium to low-cost, efficient, timely safety countermeasures, safety management, safety improvements and safety maintenance things. Are they even going to be considered as alternatives or as part of creating safer roads as well as speed? And I've attached my list. I've attached my copies about Cape Palliser. 2 things about Cape Palliser.
No, that's...
Okay, I have to stop there. Okay.
So thank you very much for coming along. We will certainly take yours and other people's comments seriously. We assure you of that. And you're welcome to stay.
I'm the last speaker though, I think, aren't I?
Sorry?
I'm the last speaker.
You are the last speaker. Yes, that's
so I will leave and thank you for listening to me.
Okay, well look.
Speaking at pace.
Most welcome.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm going to leave my notes with Amy, who's going to scan them because I need to keep them to talk to the Carterton District Council on the Tahi Road. Or I might just, is the library open today?
The library.
I'll get the photocopy and I'll leave a copy somewhere for you.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Where shall I leave it? Offices? Council offices?
Yeah, or if you want to leave them over at the library, I can go and pick them up. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Normally, I call a little adjournment at this point before we got on to officers' reports, but I think we've probably spent as much time adjourning as we listening. So I think Tim and Stefan, if you would like to come to the top table. So just to get things underway, I will move recommendation 1 that we receive the speed review hearing and deliberations report. Should I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Gray. Okay, let's, who wants to lead on here?
Oh, I can just make a couple of sort of opening comments to the table. You'll see from the report that we got a very good response, towards 200 responses from the consultation, and a high level of participation, a high level of detail in the submissions, and a reasonable number of submissions as well, though we didn't get the full list of people present to us today. The percentage numbers are there in terms of how people responded to the different questions that we asked on school, marae, high priority and gravel roads. The sentiment in the public, you would have heard quite clearly today that the Waka Kotahi decisions on the state highways is really fueling an anti-speed review sentiment amongst some submitters, and that came through very clearly. We heard a lot of comment around the approach is ideological. The approach is not empirically and based and data driven. It doesn't take sufficient account of local conditions and just imposes a blanket on us. There was a strong theme around economic cost, and we heard that again today. That struggling businesses are going to have a further imposition on them. There's certainly a social cost that's undeniable. People, if they have to travel longer, that means longer days and less time at home, less time with the family. For families that are already busy and stretched. We heard a lot of people commented that we have low crash data in the region. So why, what's the problem anyway? If we've only got eight deaths over X years, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And we heard people say that this is a dangerous experiment that may lead to frustrated drivers causing even more accidents because they're trying to, go faster than the speed limit that we've changed. So, most of what we heard in the consultation, I think, was reflected again in the oral presentations. You heard that. That said, however, our view as a team of including our engineering folk and specialists who we've spoken with and in Carston, believe that there may be an opportunity to make some decisions around schools and perhaps around marae. I think the difficult conversation is around high priority roads and whether this council, whether this table is confident in being able to cluster together a certain amount of high priority roads where there's some consensus emerging in the submissions that we could take action on, or whether that it's still too raw and too difficult to do that, and that decision would be pushed out to a subsequent time. A few people asked, is this our decision? And indeed it is our decision. It's, we're not, this isn't a legal requirement being imposed upon us, which we must do, and this is some kind of Clayton's quotation. That's certainly not the case. We make the decisions here. You make the decisions here. And it really comes down for us, looking at the local conditions on the roads that are high priority roads. It comes down to whether or not we believe the logic that irrespective of the reason the crash is occurring, whether it's a phone that they're on, or an animal that's come in front of them, or a kid that's screaming in the back seat, or whatever the reason for the crash, the mess is a lot less at a lower speed than a higher speed. As a general proposition, if you believe that, and you believe that reducing the speed as a precautionary approach will save lives in our region over time and in the future, then I think it's possible perhaps to get a group of high priority roads and make a start. If the whole approach underneath this exercise is repugnant to you, and you're really having difficulty with it, then perhaps we just address schools and marae at this point, and we work with the community at a later stage to address the rest.
Thank you. Tim, have you got anything you wish to?
I suppose in simple terms, we're trying to reduce death and serious injuries, BSI and language. serious injury is defined by requiring hospitalised treatment. And we all know that the statistics say that percentage of your minor and non-injury accidents go unreported in rural New Zealand. And whether they are minor and not quite serious injuries, are only a very fine deviation of what could have happened out there. And I think the high priority roads, we deep dive back into the last 6 years of annual plan and LTP feedback about concerns about speed within the region. A lot of those were high concentration of those concerns were around what we call the peri-urban area of the 3 towns. So that's Martin Borough, which we've looked at in this document with regard to the Tongaroa, Rotonga, Martins Road section in Martin Borough. Greytown, it's the Wood Street, Hawke Street, Kirikiri Street. And in Featherston, there's a bit of Western Lake Road we heard today about one of our first participants, and a bit of Donald Street. And reading the submissions, we didn't go far enough down Underhill Road. So those concerns are still there in the community, and they were mentioned. I think with one submission which was sort of against that philosophy. The Ponato Road is probably in the mega maps and pipelines as one of our high risk roads, not quite 10%, but it's getting very close to it. And we'll need to address it in the next funding cycle. And the reason we put it in ours was Carlton were looking at their connectors, and we've got to address the cross-boundary alignment. So it's in there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that particular road, it would make absolutely no sense to have, I don't know, 50 on our side of the creek and 80. I also think, just as a sideline, that just referring to the comment about how attractive it would be to travel along Ponatahi Road, if State Highway 2 is 80 and we keep to 100, I'm sure this is exactly true. It would be attractive as what Red Hughes Line just recently. So do you think we'd be allowed a toll road there at the same time? Or, I know the answer to that. It was only Johnson. So I think there are things where you can't just take them in isolation. You have to think about what's the roading network picture here, because it would make no sense to drive all the traffic off State Highway 1 through our back roads, which aren't nearly up to the standard of those roads, for example. But I'll just open up to sort of general comments at this stage and see where people's sort of sentiments are lying, I guess.
Can I just very quickly ask the officers here, one of the submitters that we had talked about Mega Maps having a high benefit layer which identifies corridors and streets where speed management interventions would yield the greatest benefit. That's not captured in the report that you've given?
No,
Looked at high priority roads but not high benefit ones?
that's right.
Yeah.
I think the change in government philosophy was, instead of a blanket overview, go down to the 10% change of leadership. That 10% figure is, like I say, it's quite sky stuff, but it makes it harder to identify where we are. And with our extremely low traffic volume, there's something they talk about 34 kilometres travel. We are extremely low, just a number. It's a numbers game, really. And the benefits which we can generate by doing minimal work affect a very low portion of road users in the country. So
have you looked at that, the high benefit, like regardless of it?
not in detail.
No. Would that be an easy thing for you to pull for us to look at?
Pull out.
Yep, I think would be quite good.
Although I think the high priority roads
An overlap.
are your roads which have the high crash data and a low condition score. So it's very, very similar to what you would see from, what are they called?
High benefit.
High benefit roads, yeah. So you're using very similar data to categorise those roads.
Do we have it?
Opening thoughts?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, so look, I've taken a lot out today and actually and the submissions. And a lot of them I completely agree with. And I think there's some things that we can probably agree with very, very quickly that we probably don't even need to discuss, like schools.
Yeah, 100%.
Why don't we just say, yes, that's a thing we can do 100% right now. I find it really interesting that there is that variability in schools between rural and urban. I haven't liked it from day one. I think if we're going to do it, it's all the same. A school is a school, regardless of the impact that people might say to the rural community. If you drive past Puranoa School at 60 kilometres an hour and you hit a kid, I don't care whether you have to slow down to 30 kilometres an hour, we should be doing it. That's been my view from day one, and nothing I've heard today has changed that. So, Marais, again, I think it's a no-brainer, but I think it's got to be variable, and these are all variables. So we don't want permanent speeds, because what's the point of going 30 kilometres to school at Christmas when no one's there? So they need to be variable but consistent.
I would disagree there.
Well, we can come back to that. Marais, I think a little bit more work on that, but I quite like the idea of a bit like by the racecourse when it's race day, the sign comes down and so people know that there's a racing day, and people are straight away made aware of something going on like that, and you might have a little bit of a speed reduction in that environment. I'm really persuaded by the area approach, and Louise, thank you, and Clem as well, about Martinborough. I think it's a really simple thing to do with only 4 streets into it, to say let's make it a speed zone. And you literally can't drive 50 kilometres around the square anyway, but everywhere else in town you probably can, and 50 kilometres seems to be a pretty good compromise, I would have thought, to start with. Seems to fit what most of the people are presenting and most of the people talked about. Underhill Road, there's 2 ways to address this. First is the Underhill Road is by the sports thing there. That has been a bone of contention for the people of Featherston for a long, long time. And even when my kids were little and playing sport there, it is a dangerous spot. It is 50 kilometres an hour now. Maybe something a little bit like speed bumps on the road might actually focus people's ideas. I don't know, Tim, you could probably, but something about how can we make people aware that this is a kids zone area. I don't know, but something needs to be done in that area. Middle roads again, and again, Louise and Jenny Boyne, who I didn't think Jenny would say anything about middle roads, but she did. And her husband knows how to drive these roads extremely well. And he and I have been driving these roads since we were little, since we were 15. But again, why we have our middle roads at 50 kilometres, and we've heard lots of evidence about accidents occur when we go from tar seal onto metal. That's one of our dangerous spots. We've been talking about it for 3 years. We've got bridge embankments on metal roads and so on and so forth. Why don't we just bite the bullet and go, actually, you can't drive 100 kilometres on a middle road. It's just stupid. Why don't we come up with an interim speed reduction?
Yeah.
But, we know you can't drive 100 kilometres. So what can you drive safely? Real Copper Turner, for example, dead straight, but
million
chances of it, you wouldn't drive, there's lots of places you wouldn't go 100 kilometres on it for a start. So what's a fair and reasonable speed for a metal road? It's certainly not 30 kilometres an hour, but it's not 100. So what, perhaps Tim, you could come up with something that is workable. But it may well be that, and we actually then assess that. And then the last one is all the other roads that we're talking about here. Actually, it's not the whole road, it's spots on the road that are the cause of the problem. So why don't we look at addressing the dangerous spots like we talked about earlier, with a bit more, some more signage to say, hey, slow down, dangerous corner coming up, all those sorts of things, and take a stage approach to assessing how we manage this. I think reducing speed on a road just for the sake of 1 or 2 spots is just not really a smart way to do this. We need to be more clever.
Councillor Gray.
So I like a lot of what you're saying. The only thing that I'd have to say about the variable speeds around schools, I know certainly in Featherston School, where there's a really lovely bike track on the school grounds that gets used outside of school times a lot. And also when there's buses and pickups and drop-offs and that sort of stuff that happens outside of those school hours, I think I would be a fan, or I would be in favour of having just a permanent speed reduction around schools. But everything else, I think, good. I just wanted to take a minute to kind of capture, if it's okay, what I have seen in the themes of the fors and against reducing the speeds. So for the against reducing speeds, what I've picked up is people saying that it might increase poor behaviours like using phones or unsafe overtaking, that you use more time when you're commuting through Wairarapa, that there's an increased cost and decreased efficiencies for businesses in the Wairarapa, rural farms. One of the things that is repeated a lot, that there's not enough serious or fatal accidents yet to justify change. That it's expensive to change signs, and is that a misuse of rates at this point? That there's no speed monitoring available to enforce that, and that people should be driving to conditions anyway, so there's no benefit to blanket reductions, instead, like you were saying, also having areas identified. The themes that I've seen for, and to be fair, there hasn't been as many presentations or presentations for reducing the speeds, but the things with those seem to be that it represents increased safety and prevention of fatal accidents, that there's greater protection for cyclists and pedestrians, decreased carbon emissions, it's mentioned not enough, but once or twice, and a greater enjoyment of the environment if people are going slower. So I guess what I feel my role in this is to look at the fors and against, and not necessarily just count the votes either way, but I guess contextualise a weighting between the reasons why you wouldn't drop the speeds and the reasons why you would drop the speeds. And I think that it's a fallacy to keep higher speeds to reduce things like unsafe driving. I can't see that's a bit of cognitive dissonance for me. And when we're weighing up things like it's inconvenient or annoying, or it takes longer to get somewhere, versus I don't feel safe on the road. To me, increasing safety outweighs decreasing irritation. But again, I don't have a business that's compromised by this, so that's, a different thing for me to think about. I think some of the suggestions that have come up from the presentations, there does seem to be general support for increased signage and the different types of signage. So having the chevron signs, having different visibility around that. I think that there would be merit to working to decrease the number of speed changes, which links into what's been referred to as area speed zones. I think that's been talked about in relation to Martinborough, but I think that would be really easily extrapolated to all the towns that we have in the Wairarapa, that there's defined areas that are urban and they are a set speed, and that speed is decreased.
Peculiar to Martinborough because it's the other towns all have basically two roads in.
Yeah.
So there's already that 50-kilometre zone in the town boundaries of the other two towns anyway.
Well, and I think it's about the use of towns. Like Martinborough does seem to have a lot more pedestrians, cyclists. There seems to be a lot more sort of street activity, so it does lend itself to that. But from a consistency point of view, it would make sense that in our region, this is the accepted thing, that when you get to a built-up urban area, that the speed drops right down. And I think having painted streets that indicate that, or some markings on the streets would be great. There seems to be general support to decrease the speeds around all the schools and Marae, which I'm really happy with. I think we could consider extending that to sports grounds and cemeteries. I think certainly weekends for sports grounds was great, and cemeteries from a mark of respect. And use and enjoyment of that space. I think having decreased speeds around that would be great. And one of the things that keeps coming up is looking at alternative speed reduction options. So including road markings, judder bars, signs, all of that sort of stuff, which I'd be supportive of. And yeah, a marked reduction on gravel roads. And personally, I can say that I would support that because I have been through 4 windscreens since I have moved to the Wairarapa. Whereas I have never had to replace a windscreen elsewhere in my life. So I would love to see people.
But you mean through?
No, I haven't personally,
Right, okay.
but I have.
You're looking remarkably well for having flown through windscreens.
That's your recall to the stage.
Yeah, and then the only other thing that I haven't written down, but I would like to point out, if we were to reduce roads overall, reduce the speeds overall, would that potentially extend the life of the roads that we have? Certainly the gravel roads that get destroyed by potholes with speeding cars, trucks, if we were reducing the speed. And so, yeah, from an environmental point of view, I would support reducing it from a carbon emissions point of view and a road life point of view.
But just to go through the, sorry.
I think you've raised a really, really good point, because one of the things that we actually heard from one of the submissions is the fact that actually lowering it has had a different effect.
Increases.
And yeah, had an increase of emissions from idling. A lot of the cars like having to slow down and
Not talking about idling though, that's,
Oh, no.
that's in a city.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if we do see that there, that, you know, more cars because being slower, so, you know, there's little congestion build up areas. I'm just raising that because it was brought up as one of the things that was actually said. So, you guys have, like, honestly, you've literally covered most of mine.
Well, you have to-
I think it's really important that actually, one, gravel roads, we need to be having a look at how, you know, that the speed limit changes. I think Councillor Plymouth made some really good points there, and a lot of that is from the fact that speeding on them does cause more damage. So you know, that ties into what Councillor Gray was saying before, and I think that I can't just say how impressed, can't say it enough how impressed I was with South Featherston School coming and presenting and hearing from a rural school about what the concerns are, and the fact that they, you know, that what they're wanting is they're wanting more time, and that when Pauline Headley was there, and she said about it being increasing it to an hour rather than a 20-minute time frame for drop off and pick up. That really surprised me, but you know, because I didn't realise that it only went for such a small amount of time, and that possibly just increasing that from that point, so for an hour each way, may actually cover a lot of what, you know, because a lot of the time the children that are playing at the school, they're not going to stick around once there's no kids there. So they do tend to kind of wander off and maybe go to the park or go somewhere else. So by increasing that level of time may actually be able to help with those schools. I think that it's really, really important that that rural is treated. It doesn't matter if you're a rural or an urban school. I think it that was another very good point, and from one of our submitters is the fact that if you're rural and you're going 60 past a school, and yet the damage to when you're urban going 60 is one of the factors that they actually put into the report, but they didn't mention about the fact of leaving it at 60 going through a rural zone where there's a school, and that's a real shame, because you know what, they're all the same age. You know, these children are still the same age, and from the mouths of our next generation politicians, I'd like to think, you know, they said that the little ones at their school are really fast.
They are.
And so a lot of the time they can get through, and you don't see them coming between two school buses. You know, so it doesn't matter whether you're, and all of our schools in a way are rural, because we are very much provincial area. So I think that's really, that was something that was really important just to be aware of. So possibly having those lights or, you know, the little flashing lights start from 2:30 till 3:30, solar, whatever that they do, that we can do would be fantastic and may alleviate that in some way. I think it would be great if all towns just went to, you know, like had that 50 surrounding area and I would like to see if there was a way that could be done, and Tim, you would probably be the best person to ask when it came to Marae, to be able to, you know, so people know when they're coming up towards the Marae that there's something going on. You know, is there a way that could be done, or is it just advising that there's a Marae coming up to the Marae? I mean, obviously, I've made my concerns about where Hauriki sits and the fact that and the rugby grounds, you know, it's not just, it's the same as Featherston, right? So, you know, we need to make sure that but at least in Featherston, it's always been 50. You know, you turn a corner and suddenly it's 100 and you're still on the, you know, have all the sports grounds there. It's insane. So that just needs to be fixed. And I know that when I brought it up in the past, we told that wasn't on the scope of NZTA at the time. And so now it obviously is, and that is something I would definitely want to see, that reduces down to 250. But with the rest of it, and cemeteries, which I think hasn't really been covered as much here, but I believe that cemeteries would probably, it is good because there is Western Lake, from the Western Lake, like everyone that's living out that way, they come into Featherston from that side as well, not necessarily just from one in and out, you know, like from the main highway. So another one of our rural areas, I guess, and making sure that you can slow that speed down and then pass there, increase it again. But I think that the reality is when there is we've all been to cemeteries, they tend to be on roads that aren't at 50. They, for some reason, you know, they do tend to sit on the outskirts of towns where the speed limit increases, but there's a lot of people who are there who are possibly, you know, like, well, no, every single funeral I've gone to has a mixture from very young to very old. And I'm just going to put it out there. And so we need to make sure that it's safe for everyone that's getting in and out from the cemetery. I know from Featherston, you don't drive in, and it's the same as Martinborough, and I'm sure it's probably the same in Greytown.
Drive into Featherston, you drive into.
No. Featherston, and there's normally only just the hearse. Everyone else parks outside it, and it's the same in Martinborough.
When you drive to State Highway.
Yeah, so it's you know, that's why.
For Greytown as well, so it's just different architecture for Greytown.
So I think it's really important that we look at reducing the speeds there, because you're talking about just suddenly there being a whole lot of people there coming out of the gates or going in. Yeah, those are my thoughts anyway.
I can see so I haven't driven into Featherston.
Can I just clarify the thing about schools? One of the reasons we're looking at schools is in the dropout zone is because of the huge concentration of people there in a very short period of time. So whilst I acknowledge that they use schools after hours and things during school holidays, it's not the concentration, and there's not the buses, and there's not the three layers of cars with mums and dads dropping their kids off and picking up. So that's why they're looking at that, because it's the concentration at it.
Less about the presence of children and more about the fact that the traffic and use at that point makes it harder.
So if you know, and I can only talk for Greytown School because I did it for 6 years, but if you go there, there are cars parked on either side of the road, on both sides of the school, and literally there is room for one car to go down the middle of the road, and there are kids going backwards and forwards. But any other time during the day, there are kids still going in and out of the school, but it's just not that concentration. And it's not, the problem is when you get all those cars and buses there, you can't see the kid run out.
Right.
Any other time, it's open.
Okay, because my take on it is that if it's an area that you're more likely to encounter a child, that area could be identified as a higher chance, but they absolutely get your points. Yeah.
So some of the points that I've made, firstly, like everybody else, schools, I agree. It doesn't seem logical to have a different speed past one school and past another. That doesn't. I'll explain a little more about that later. Marai has come up. My view is that before we do anything there, we have to try and do a little more consultation and actually hear from each of the Marai. I did see one Marai spokesperson actually did comment, or that I noticed in here, but her comments were nothing to do with the Marai. And it seems to me, if I think about the three Marai, there are some quite distinct differences, particularly between Kuanui and Oariki on the one hand, because in both of those cases I can drive to them and actually drive in and park off the street. Papuai's a bit different here. I've actually got to park on Tar Road if I'm going to visit the Marai, and I think that creates a different level of risk.
Park in there as well.
Sorry?
You can park in there as well.
But I think you have to be sort of invited, don't you? Normally the gates are closed and people park.
Not if there's anything on, normally, yeah, so if there's anything on, then the gates are open.
So it seems to me we need to hear from Marai committees before we do that. One of the things I definitely am slightly obsessed with is that whatever we do has to be consistent and reasonably simple. I think one of the things that is a risk actually at the moment going through our towns is you often go from 70 to 50 to 40, and you can often spend more time looking at what you think the speed limit's meant to be than looking at the road. I think that's just unhelpful, which is why I was quite interested in the fact there were several people who spoke about what could happen around Martinborough. And I have to say I was sort of quite attracted to that notion that all of Martinborough would be X. My view is that X should be 40, not 50. After all, most of it's 50 right now. It makes no difference to leave it at 50. Unless you actually create something that is just a little bit distinct and different, you actually haven't improved the safety of cyclists, at least in the short time, and you haven't sort of created quite that. You've come here to relax and sort of unwind and what have you.
All that safety around Martinborough Square that the community board's been asking for
a while,
for a long time.
The lighting, yeah.
Yeah.
And but then they do come to some sort of specific issues, don't there? And one of them, for example, was obviously Regent Street. Is it 100k at some point?
Just yeah. So it's 50 from one end of town all the way to the rugby ground, and then it's 100. That's from the rugby ground to Purotonga Road.
Gotcha. So that seems an odd hangover.
It's
distant.
Yeah, it is from a distant past.
So there's the opportunity to sort of fix those things up. I was particularly interested in the comments about Underhill Road and Wakefield and Buzz Road. Big things that's changed here, of course, is the amount of lorry traffic that's on that road during working hours.
It's been a concern way before the quarry got put in. It's been a concern for
And the fact that it's now become a cycling route as well. I mean, I think it would be, in my opinion, it's very difficult not to contemplate some changes there. But on the other hand, if we're going to make a consistent rule around metal roads, then it will be captured by that anyway.
No, it won't, because the road starts past it. It's Tar Seal outside the sports ground.
Yes, it is.
Over the bridge and down.
The middle of the road starts down there.
Which brings me to the sports ground, because I was having a sort of an offline discussion at one point about the fact that the sports ground at Featherston does actually include in real life the school, as well as multiple sports facilities. And it is very heavily used by young people times of the week. And it makes sense, therefore, I think, not to treat necessarily the whole of Featherston as a zone, but at least to treat that part of it as a special area. And at that stage, Councillor Maynard said, well, I think if that was the case, you would also want to include other sort of high use by young people sports facilities as well, and I would agree with that. I don't know if it's quite so applicable in Greytown, Alistair. I don't know what your thoughts would be.
No,
It's not quite the same as Featherston.
so, because you've got off-road parking outside Memorial Park.
Yeah.
And down
Yeah.
the rugby club ground, you're lucky to go 10 kilometres an hour down there when the rugby game's on. If you can even get.
Get out and walk, eh?
So I do think that as we come to make changes, making a change doesn't, in my opinion, require a risk assessment.
Mm.
So that, for example, and risk is a combination of the chance of something happening with the enormity of it happening. And to me, that puts any risk of death or extreme damage to a young person, that to me is a very high risk you need to contemplate. So I think there, it definitely persuades me that we need sort of consistent low traffic going past schools. But I also think in other circumstances, you do need to think about the cost benefit. Incidentally, idling cars don't generate very much carbon dioxide. It's actually cars going 100 that do. But if you spend money in one way, you cannot spend it in another. And spending it in another may actually save more lives, reduce damage to people more. And so we've contemplated today some road reductions, but also some fine reduction, enhancements, what have you. Well, do we have a clear idea which of those is actually more likely to save a life, question mark? Because one of them may not actually be worthwhile and the other one may be. And I think that's something we need to contemplate as well. I am conscious that for many businesses, what's happened recently between here and Masterton has added greatly to their costs and their inconvenience. It's something I think we also need to contemplate as we go forward. Anybody else like to?
One other thing I'd add to the mix, and I would say that the process on the state of consultation has made this job of ours significantly harder, and going to be much harder to justify any reduction, particularly where we've got nearly 80% of people, 70% of people against those reductions, and that was the same, probably higher with them, and it was just ignored. So I think it places us in a very difficult position to take and listen to what our community has said, even though we know there might be, we might have to do some difficult choices, but it makes it really much difficult, and it adds to that whole distrust of councils and central government. And what Kotahi has done, no one in this country favours.
No. I would just point out, though, that the consultation process with the community, it's not a poll that we've run.
No,
it's not just weighing up numbers of for and against. It's listening to reasons within the community, and some of those reasons are repeated a lot. Some have only been said once or twice. But I think that's part of our role, is to weight those different reasons, not necessarily just count opinions around it, because we would run a poll differently.
Look, absolutely, but and you can look through the report that we got, not about the officer's report, I'm talking about the document one. And if you wanted, I could go through it and find holes in every single page. So that in itself has been done with a particular methodology that is made more difficult because of consultations with Waka Kotahi. It's used Waka Kotahi's methodology, which the community distrusts to begin with.
Yeah.
So we have a resolution before us that we received the.
Stefan just wasn't correct me on that. But
Oh, does he?
Oh, no, I wasn't. No, I was actually out it. I was going to say that actually, if you look at the contentious, potentially contentious answer, which is the area where you've got 73% of people who were opposed to the high priority roads. But actually, if you drill down into the results of the answers to that question, only 26 indicated that they thought all the speed limits should remain the same, which is interesting because that's 26 out of 163 who said, no, we don't want to change anything. All of the remainder, which left about, 15%? All of the remainder of the people in the answer to that question went on to say they would like to make some change, include or exclude. So, I mean, if you were looking for, I think that goes to your point. This isn't a 73% no. It's actually a 15% no. And the rest of the people are saying, and we'd like to do this or this or this.
Yep.
Yeah.
So sometimes the this or this or this has actually got nothing to do with speed, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a resolution that we received the report. All in favour, please say aye. Okay, so let me just outline what I plan to do procedurally from here. Recommendations 2 and recommendations 3, I think, are a job lot. One is that we receive the submissions, noting that there are 183 of them. I don't know whether we keep the 32 are confirmed to be heard or 16, change it to 16 were heard.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. So I suggest we do those as a complete lot. And then we come to a sort of starting.
Can we move that first and then go to the next one?
Those out of the way.
Okay, then, right, would you like to move those? Okay, councillor Maynard, councillor Plummer. All in favour, please.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So now we start to come to some specific issues, and I would like to suggest that we pick them off, starting with schools. Let's have a recommendation about that. Then Marae, then the Martinborough zone. Now, the recommendation might just be that we send it out for further consultation or deeper consultation. We indicate what our preference is likely to be. We get feedback on that. Then whether we do the Featherston sports ground or all sports grounds, I think that's something we should tick off. And then I think I've crossed out the word priority roads and I put specific issues. So we have, for example, the road, Western Lake Road was mentioned as an example. We've had Underhill, Wakefield. Can you, while we're discussing, possibly you could bring a list of other ones that might need special consideration?
Could I?
Well,
If I just make a suggestion on that,
Please.
we want to be a bit more definitive here and say, where we say yes to something, go, yep, that's good. Where we want to have more discussion or talk about individual roads, perhaps we just send it back and say, do some more work on this, come back to us. Because otherwise we could spend weeks here going, oh, this road or that road. And actually that's not our job. That's
Well, I don't know that there are many of those roads. That's why.
Well, you might find that you concentrate on the roads that have been brought to our attention through oral submission, but inadvertently not really concentrate on roads that were stressed as important in the written.
That's why I was asking you.
So that's why that's why I came up with that idea to say,
Right.
actually, perhaps if they go back and concentrate on this, for want of a better term, the black spots, that was very topical. You know, Tim will be able to work out where the black spots on our roads are, and maybe we address those rather than whole roads. It might be the suggestion.
That's a different thing.
They were touched on cemeteries as well. Each of those roads in Featherston and Martinborough are identified in this report to reduce the speed limit in front of them. So we can tick those off. We're happy with them in principle. Schools are either 60 or 30. If they're 60 in the rural area, there's no reason we can't have variable speed limits through those dedicated times we've spoken about at 8:30 to 9:30. The variable speed signage is controlled by the school. They turn it on and off, so it doesn't go on through school holidays and whatever else. So to have one of them outside the school, that guy has some responsibility as well. Which I don't think will be a drama, but that's just the state of the science these days.
May
We
I?
heard through the mission today a lot about White Rock Road. That's not even in this document at all to be touched, so we can park that up short term. We've touched on Huntsfield Roads discussion today, and probably a blanket 40 around the CBD. That was our philosophy in the very first paper that went to council. It was 40s, 80s and 60s. So I don't think, they need to be addressed, but this is an interim plan. The ability to roll that out and do a bit more communication and that going forward.
May I ask a question, just while we're on this, because it's just to do with the other proposal with regards to Marae. Are those lights only for schools?
The Marae can have a variable board outside, so it only goes.
I'm just thinking, even if there was just something little that went, my main focus is Koinai because of where it sits and the fact that it is, it's rural and you can't see it because you've got to come around that bend and then you're pretty much almost on top of it. So, would it have to be directly outside the marae, or could it just be over? And they'd still be able to control it, or I don't know, because I don't.
So it's as far as but can reach.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't really be outside, it could be in advance of it. And also, if they're going to go that far and take responsibility for that, there's advanced signs they can put down, which they can flip down and flip back up.
Yeah.
And not in use.
I'm just thinking.
I think give it the responsibility of the rights, give them the means to do it. So,
But also, because I think it would be really good if perhaps if we sent something to our Māori Standing Committee, because there are members for each marae that sit on there, and say that we would just like them and that we're needing this back within 7 days or whatever, if they can just send it out. Even I think Koinai's having a meeting today, so that might be quite hard, but it would be really, really good if we're saying we just want to know, or do they just want signage,
Could we do a recommendation subject to?
Yeah, that's right.
By the standing.
Yeah. So then, just so none of this all come through to council. So
I don't think there's any great rush though, is there?
pardon?
It doesn't have to be back in 7 days.
No, I'm just that was just in blah blah blah. Yeah,
Okay, right.
yeah. But in time for a report to be able to be done to come to council, so you don't want to leave them with not hearing anything and then.
Yeah.
So that was what I said.
Okay, has somebody got a recommendation with regard to speed zones outside schools they wish to propose?
Yeah.
Go for it, Alison.
Reduce speed zones outside schools that are consistent and variable. Plan. So variable speed zone, So recommend the proposals regarding school speed zones are included in the draft speed limit plan, noting that we expect them to be consistent and variable for school times. Does that make sense?
Do you think that's specific enough?
So
you get it?
for 30.
Well,
Does that mean that it go to 30
Yes.
on a variable rate for all schools?
All schools.
Because each child's
All schools.
life is
An hour
equally
each way.
important, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So-
on a variable basis.
Yeah, so
In rural areas and a permanent basis and no,
rural, variable both.
variable on both. Okay.
Because none of them are going to want to use them
Yeah.
during school holidays.
Yeah.
so are we nominating 30?
Yes.
Yes.
What's being recommended?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And can it be between 8:30 to 9:30 and 2:30 to 3:30? Or does someone have a better time?
Can we
School-
just have a quick ask
School turns it on and off anyway.
costs for those on-off ones? Or does having a nominated
Does
time?
MOE?
No, I'm not sure what the costs were, but 12, 18 months ago, we had budget for the school,
For all of the schools? Okay,
but we're in that supply and demand scenario, so it might have done, but
yeah, but just off,
we can make it work.
yeah,
And Ministry of Education, do they put anything towards it? No. Okay.
You can make it work within existing budgets.
Time of having gone through the roof.
Well, thanks, Tim. That's awesome to hear.
Yes.
Yep.
So could you read it to us, please?
Recommend proposals regarding reduced school speeds are included in the draft speed management plan, noting we expect them to be 30 k's per hour and on a variable basis for all schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just, so to bleed on, I just really wanted to drill down on that cost though. So you're saying that it's already included in the budget, the money's there. And so that if we don't have those signs ordered and paid for by a certain date, that's not going to be affected by the next LTP? Because there's a road signs, isn't there?
I think further to that resolution, I can understand the variable past the school gate, but like out here in Martinborough, up Robert Street and down Weld Street, you want them down there as well, the variable speeds, or just
No, we've got them on Princess. Already got them on Princess and on Grey. There's one on Grey and Dublin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that covers the school. We don't need any additional ones. I mean, otherwise, where do we stop if kids are walking home?
Each
Like,
kid-
yeah, I know. With a lollipop. No, I think we've already got that covered, I think.
And
I've got no problems with going out tomorrow and ordering signs.
Okay,
And we were going to treat all early childhood centres and kindergartens and so forth in the same way as we treated schools. Does that extend to signage, or
That's tricky because
No.
a lot of them, or the vast majority, with the exception, they're private businesses, so they might be closed tomorrow.
And then, they're not in, like, they're not sitting on Ministry of Education grounds, like
different.
they don't sit, so it's a completely
Yeah,
different.
and they've got drop off
Yeah.
all over the place and yeah.
So,
so they're not within the scope of the resolution?
no, no, we're looking at the schools.
I
And if we
don't think I wish to save only those children who exist on Ministry of Education land.
No, that's not what I'm saying. However, if we're dropping the speed limit within the town to
Yeah.
40 already, like which is what we had discussed, that we'd want to look at it to already be dropping down within the town. They sit within that in town, so that they already have that with also drop off spots. So
So the school.
Yeah.
Except for an hour.
yeah, no, we can look at school's done.
I think we just need to lift our recommendation to be slightly more specific, because if, for example, with Martinborough School, the only road that we are thinking of speed limiting is Dublin Street. And if we're not thinking of Wells Street, I think we have to say that.
No, because it's from Princess Street. So there's one on Princess Street when you're getting towards the school.
Yeah.
There's one on there, so with a light.
Yeah.
It's on Dublin Street, and there's another one on Grey Street on the opposite side of the school.
Yeah.
So on both sides, so that it actually has lighting and the speed thing on there already, I believe. Yeah.
If just direct us to appropriate and consistent.
Weld Street is two over. Yeah.
We're getting into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
They've got the objective.
Sometimes you have to get into the weeds because it's
Yeah, no.
two-thirds of our resolution that
Yeah.
matter, not our.
But Weld Street's actually 2 streets over, so it's not.
So the resolution,
No.
did you want to read the resolution out?
Recommend proposals regarding reduced school speeds are included in the draft speed management plan, noting we expect them to be 30 k's per hour and on a variable basis for all schools.
Right,
Yes.
so that then says to Tim and Stefan, go forth and be appropriate for school.
Yeah, and we can come back. Up there.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we're not just going to go out and do this.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, any councillor comments further to that?
No, I'm happy with that with this.
Okay, do we have a seconder, please, just to do a double check?
Sorry, who moved that one?
Alistair?
Alistair, sorry.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder?
Yep.
Dirk,
Oh, you
doesn't
did.
matter.
Sorry, I didn't-
Okay, all in favour, please say.
Variable time. So you'd have it like the word variable in there. So what are you varying?
Yeah, that's the time, yeah.
So you want time instead of basis? In that, with that wording?
It's variable speed,
Variable speed.
probably down to 30,
Variable speed
variable
for
speed.
all schools.
to 30 kilometres an hour.
So is that right? Is that what you want?
Well,
Mhm.
I wonder, Tim, if you could, while we go and discuss the next issue, we'll just have a route back to that, because I do agree, what is it we're actually agreeing here? So if we're agreeing 30 kilometres an hour between 8:30 and 9:30, 2:30 and 3:30, I can't see the harm in saying that.
Mm.
At other times, whatever the local speed
Well,
limit is.
we're not actually saying that because the school turns the
We'll be
thing,
able to turn them on and off.
each school's going to determine.
So if the school's finishing at midday.
Yeah.
They could
They might turn it on.
turn them on at
for a sports day on
11:30.
Saturday or something like that.
So that's why it's variable.
I think there is also some issue around speed enforcement.
I think
If
that's
there's
got
variable
huge legal
times.
issues. I mean, we don't normally allocate to a school
Okay.
how it can.
Do it like they do in Sydney. That's fine.
Do they, Tim? These are turned on and off by schools all around the place?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's common practice.
It may be common practice, that doesn't make it legal practice. What we have to say to the school is, these are the hours during which you can insist on 30K. The rest of the time, they're subject to our rules. Now, if we're saying we delegate to schools, well, actually, I don't think we're going to say that for all sorts of reasons.
Well, the school has to be the one that clicks it.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it legal for it to flag it.
There's a legal speed limit and there's a warning speed. Currently for a warning speed, then they've got different legal status. Currently have a warning speed limit outside Martin School, that light green, so just look at Mr. Robinson's report. He covers the legal distinctions. Your task today with the legal speed limit. Warning speed limits different.
Different.
But what we're saying is it's going to be legitimate for a school to down its sign, but whether it downs its sign or not, the speed limit is still going to be 30K.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's what you said.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're inviting schools to advertise. Yeah. So, Tim, if you could just pen some words for us, and we'll come back to that. Just so we are being specific enough to keep ourselves out of the courts. The next thing on the list is.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just be really certain that excluding private
businesses.
childcare and businesses, because they might be captured by a city zone, an urban zone, but that might be at 40. So their speed outside their early childhood centre will be 40.
And they'll be able to.
And the state schools will be 30. Is that what's being proposed?
It's,
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
because I think the big difference between an early childcare, this is not 100% universal, but for the most part, a parent takes a child in. In fact, they have to take them in and register them as a child. Primary school child often walks in themselves as a.
Thank you.
Okay, Marai. So my view is that we need to go back either through the standing committee to each Marai and.
We don't need to contact each marae. That's what we have with a Māori Standing Committee for, and we have representatives that sit from each marae on there. So I think the best way for us to do it would be to actually recommend or that this recommendation goes to is put to each of the marae through their Māori Standing Committee marae representative. So if they can come back to us, something like that. I mean, I'm not getting quite the wording right, but.
Okay, so is the recommendation as simple as that we request Māori Standing Committee to consult Marai on what their preferred speed?
The marae, the Māori Standing Committees, the marae representatives.
Yep.
to take this back to them. You know, to what the proposal is. So, and the proposal is looking at signage. Do they want to be able to have something similar to what the schools have? For when they have large gatherings, or are they happy just with a signage saying that you're coming up to a marae?
But remember, what you've done with the schools is set the legal speed limit outside the school, and then the signage just flashes that when it needs to. What I think what you can't do outside marae or anywhere else is have a variable speed limit controlled by the sign. So I think you may need to do the same as you've done in the school model outside marae as well. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
And I think what we need to do is to find out what do each
Yeah.
ride.
Are they
What
wanting
are
it
they
like that, or are they quite happy to be on the same speed limit as what the speed limit is?
But bearing in mind, our communication with them needs to be sufficiently different to the conversations that we've already had with the Māori Standing Committee.
Yeah.
So we need to give them enough specificity to have that conversation with their committees.
Because it's
Like, what is
with
the
each
proposal?
marae, so
Yeah.
that we're asking what that marae wants, because two sit within towns, pretty much, and the other one doesn't. Sits rural.
Okay, could we rather than do a recommendation, just make this an action point for the officers to go and seek further information from the Māori Standing Committee on this?
Yeah.
Have you got on with the wording around the school stuff? Still working on it?
You're still working on it. It's,
Right, yeah. We'll come back.
Could we move on from the discussion about the marae? And this may be me speaking out of turn, but I feel like we've had enough information that would support broadly reducing the limit around marae. Would it be possible to make a recommendation pending approval from the Māori Standing Committee so they can then sort of feedback to us? And then,
Well, I would say we probably haven't had feedback from them on this. Certainly haven't had anything in our documents that say consultation has been done with the marae.
Yeah, I think Kuanui in particular is sufficiently unique to be able to that it might well have quite different views on
Yeah,
what should be happening on that road.
they're unique to this area, but there's so many rural marae in the country, like, you know, I'm not sure what. But they're all probably going through this at the moment, but they're very unique without, yeah, totally.
And they'll all want to have their own.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
important, it's important that they get their say in this.
Mm.
And it doesn't need to be done today. We've got till 2020, whatever it is, to actually have these things done. So let's get.
we've had this consultation open for quite a long time, so,
The consultation's finished.
but we have had it prior to this, it's been open for a long time, like there's been opportunity to feed in specifically.
Yeah, but it's not a resource meeting. This we can go back and say, hey, we want to hear from you. We're not going to make a decision on this until we've heard from you. Perfectly legitimate to do that.
I agree. Well, I think interestingly that the most fascinating proposal that has come up in the course of the day is in regards to the Martinborough zone. So does anybody, particularly anybody from Martinborough, have a recommendation on this issue?
Just change it all to 40.
Change it all to 40?
Why does it have to be?
Look, it's old, right?
Why would it say just for Martinborough?
Find the boundary.
Yeah,
Well, I'll tell you why. Because there have been several people, including the Martinborough Community Board, who have amended it to us. And why would we do it somewhere else where it might not be regarded as that important? Unless we ask them first.
Well, from a continuity point of view, if we're looking at region wide, we're looking at district wide.
Okay, give me an example in Featherston where it doesn't apply already.
What do you mean?
Well, it's already 50 kilometres inside the.
40.
So if we drop it, so for all urban areas,
So I'm not in favour of going to 40, but having a speed zone. We've
So
already
you mean just blanketly 50?
take you forever to get from anywhere in Martinborough if you're down bottom end of Jericho Street or further to get to the other side of town.
It's not going to take you forever. It's going to take you marginally longer, but potentially.
Gosh, man, it was growing hit by the minute.
And additionally, if we are looking at reducing speeds in smaller towns, if it is going to be more of a hassle to drive your car because it's only 40 k's, it might influence behaviour to people using their feet more than their cars.
Well,
Imagine if you-
I haven't seen any justification for reducing the speed. I've seen lots of comment about consistency. We know in Martinborough, there's whole lots of different speeds within the town boundary. We know that now because the town's grown faster than our speed changes have. This is a chance to say, let's just create an area here. But I don't see any justification for reducing to 50. There's been no evidence on any of these streets to say this is a dangerous street because you're going 50 kilometres now. There's talk about saying, oh, reduce the speed around the square. Well, I drive around the square probably 3 or 4 times a week, like most people. I don't think I've ever driven around the square at 50 kilometres an hour because you can't.
No.
So it's already done because you physically can't drive that way.
I imagine if you trialled 40 in Martinborough on the basis that the community board, expressing the views of the community, have asked for us to.
No, that's not true.
They have asked us.
I literally asked that question, said, is this the community view? And he said, no, it's
No, but he-
No, but
it's from Joppin that we have
previous,
the community view.
from previous representations to council, when we were doing the Martinborough Street lighting project, there was a clear message from the community board on behalf of the community that they wanted speed reduction.
So look, I've got a fundamental problem with
That was around the square,
up and say,
but that was just around the square. And I think if we were looking at reducing it to 40, I think I'm then we go, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Is that I think if the whole town was to be changed to 40, then that probably needs to be what is
Consulted on.
you
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
consult on that,
Yeah, I agree.
because that is a big change.
Yeah,
Changing it to
Yeah.
50 wouldn't require
It's
consultation because all
easy.
we're doing is we're just
we're doing is making
they're nominal.
the outskirts
I agree.
450,
Yeah.
which means that we wouldn't have to do
Yeah.
anything else. But if we were to reduce it further to 40, I think that would still need to go back through the process. That makes sense.
Okay, so I think what we're sort of converging on is that we have a recommendation that says we consult on a Martinborough speed zone of 40 k per hour.
Right around.
Yeah, right around.
And
Now, the question is, we can just discuss this on its own. We can then come back to, do we have a second one that incorporates or treats Featherston and Greyhound separately? So
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works
Yeah.
here though.
Yeah.
Cost. What is it to consult Martinborough community on this going to cost for the sake of $10 an hour? It's just when we are already strapped for money, this is not a use of ratepayer money. Until we've got a defined benefit that this will achieve, and we haven't, even in our documents, there's nothing in there that says this will be good for the whole town. Might be certain parts of the town, but not the whole lot. And if we're talking about spending money, I don't know, what's the consultation going to cost us for Martinborough?
well, we're going to just try.
A consult for the district,
We're going to
to a consultation for the district.
we're going to
off the district.
kind of keep the standing orders here. So we're not even going to discuss it unless we can get a mover in a second. So what do you think the recommendation is, Amy?
I heard consult on a Martinborough speed zone set at 40 k.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're moving that?
Yeah.
I will second that. Okay, do you wish to talk to it?
I think we've kind of
Yeah,
covered it.
right.
Yeah, I'm not used to talking after moving something. I
You can,
like to
you
speak
can,
before it.
you can, and you always get it right. at the front.
Yeah.
So Alistair, you're opposed? Yes, thank you. Therefore, anybody, do you want to say more?
I just,
You-
there's no justification in
Bit further the other way.
any presentation to make it area wide.
Councillor, you.
I am for it, but extending it to making it consistent through the 3 towns. I don't see the benefit if we're just going to do it for Martinborough, not for the other towns. And I would be for it because I think that it makes towns more usable for cyclists, for pedestrians, for people walking their dogs. from an emissions point of view, from an encouraging people to walk rather than drive their cars, I think that it's a very sensible thing. And when you say looking for evidence for it, I think that it would be a very difficult thing to collect evidence for or against. So I'd question what you would need in terms of evidence.
One of the things about making decisions on these plan changes, you can only make decisions on the evidence that is presented to you. You cannot use outside evidence. We have been presented with evidence that doesn't support what you're telling me. None of it. I support all submissions that say reduce the whole towns, all the towns. Hasn't even been consulted.
Look, we haven't got to all of the towns. We're only discussing Martinborough.
Still nothing in Martinborough about that either.
Well, the big difference between Martinborough and the other two towns are the vast numbers of cyclists. And I think you'll find that going back a very, very long time, there have been concerns about the safety.
Was not presented to us.
I believe it was mentioned in oral submission.
By one person.
Yep, that's right. Okay, so we have a recommendation. I'll ask you to just
to consult on a Martinborough speed zone set at 40 km/h.
right. Okay, all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
No, thank you. Now, do you wish to come in with a second recommendation on the same thing that we extended to Featherstone and Greytown? You don't have to do it like that.
I'd like to think about that more because I'm taking on board what Alistair's saying. If we haven't specifically consulted on that, does that extend beyond what we can achieve under our hearings committee? I like it as an idea, but I don't want to float it if it's not kosher.
Is anything unkosher about it?
Yeah, if it's not.
Anything that's not kosher, right?
The recommendation.
There are specific
That's
what
40.
you can and cannot do.
You are asking me the question. I think my sense is that I agree with Councillor Plummer that the creation of urban speed zones is a good idea and one that you might want to take to community, but it isn't supported by the consultation and the response to the consultation that we've just had. I think it would.
You didn't ask for speed.
That's what I'm saying. We didn't.
It's outside of scope.
No, it's not what we're talking about.
So, or at least I'd want to think about that a bit more.
So we'll leave that with you.
Because my gut
and it could be
feeling-
done other ways.
Yeah,
sometimes.
my gut feeling overall is that I think there would be better buy-in across the board if we were to reduce and have urban speed zones and then the bigger rural roads, keeping those at the higher rate.
See, what I would say to you is that Martinborough is the anomaly in this because the other two towns actually have area speed zone. They're 50 kilometres. They're already 50 kilometres. Martinborough is the outlier.
Yeah.
And what we're
Okay.
trying to do is fix that. now.
Let's keep going. We're doing quite good time wise. Are there some words on the schools that
This,
I think that's what it's called, variable speed limit. The 30 kilometres an hour during morning drop off and afternoon pickup times. So that allows them to utilise it within their own
yes.
time frame. Their school's going to be slightly different. If we set time limits to them, specific time limits, it may not suit the school.
may not, I agree.
So you can use an example. So Warwick College's pick up at 3 o'clock, St Matthew's pick up at 3:15.
Yeah.
So you've got different
Right.
straight and that.
Very good.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So you've got, and then you've got intermediate in the middle of that, which is a different time again.
Yeah.
You've got to leave a little bit of flexibility.
Okay, so did you get that, Amy? Or would you
It's
like a
very
repeat?
soft. I need to.
Yeah.
I can
Speak
really.
up, Tim.
So hang on,
Speed of 30 kilometres.
hang on. Where are you going from? Because you've got noting we expect. Are you getting rid of all of that from noting we expect?
So we're talking about the recommendation around speed limits outside schools.
Yeah.
Where
So
did it start from?
So you had recommend proposals regarding reduced school speeds are included in the draft speed management plan. comma, noting we expect them to be 30k per hour and on a variable basis for all schools. That's what I had. So I need to know
Changing that
what
note.
change.
So, I mean, really what that wording there is, it's not a recommendation. It's a
Oh, yeah.
recommendation to have a recommendation.
So
So now we're coming to the specifics of a recommendation.
you
which
want
is-
this as a separate,
Yes,
So-
get rid of that,
so you want to withdraw it,
obliterate it,
okay?
yeah, and replace it with recommend
A variable speed zone
A
of
variable speed zone.
30 kilometres an hour
Yep,
during morning drop off and afternoon pickup.
and we should add outside all schools in the district.
outside all schools
Right.
in the district.
Yeah. I think we've talked about it sufficiently, unless somebody's got that wish to add. Okay, do we have a mover? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Gray. All in favour, please say aye. Aye, thank you. Now, the issue came up of sports grounds, in particular with respect to Featherston. Do we wish to have a recommendation here in respect of Featherston or more widely? Or none at all?
Again, could I suggest we give this as an action point to the officers to go back and examine ways that we can make like sports grounds safer?
Mm.
Come back to us.
Thank
Can
you.
we reduce the speed around these at 30?
Right.
30 when,
Mm.
because you don't notice the children there, do you?
So could you give me some?
It's an action point for officers to report back with options to make the area outside the sports ground of Featherston safer for
I think
community safety.
we can reduce the speed down that strip.
Yeah, but let's let them do the work first.
So,
So they'll commit.
sorry, who they were reporting back to? Is it via email or is
No,
it council?
it'll report back to council.
And the
It'll report to council.
Okay,
Because all these are recommendations to council.
Now, we then had are we all agreed with that? We are, excellent. So we had a discussion around specific roads. Alistair's suggestion was that we in fact ask for a report on all the relevant specific roads that we might wish to alter, such as Underhill, such as Bucks Road. And they were the ones that, as somebody said, came up in oral, but there are others in the written submissions as well, which we would not want to omit.
No, that's not quite.
Is that not what you said?
Not quite what I said.
the gravel roads? Oh,
Yeah, so what I suggested was that we get Tim to look at our high priority black spots across our district and come up with a plan to address safety concerns in those spots rather than dealing with whole roads.
So then really what you're saying is that you recommend that we keep the roads at the same speed that they are.
And look at other methodologies to whether it be chevrons on the corners or white lines or rumble strips or.
But it's kind of two different things that we're talking about, because the
What
whole
about
point of the
gravel?
hearings committee is just to talk about speed, not to talk about.
Well, it's all about safety.
No, but you're committing us to considerable cost in exploring those. I mean, all of those options are not speed and they cost money, and it's outside of the scope of.
Through speed, it's going to cost money.
It's outside of the
Yeah.
scope of the committee's activity at the
Well,
moment.
I'll touch on that. We've done a survey of Whanatai Road, right from Martinborough through to East Tarapai, Lake Ferry Road and Cape Palliser Road with regard to deficiencies in our delineation signage. It's already been done. And it's going to be implemented within the current budget if we can get the material. So we've already done.
Excellent.
and tore it.
Why don't we do it and assess it?
Haven't gone up to. The only reason I'm asking about those spots is because of the fact that we've got about gravel roads. So,
Coming to gravel road.
We're coming to gravel roads.
oh, sorry.
So if you've done that, Tim,
No.
my thoughts would be, let's do that and assess the impact of that. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Because when you say assess the impact of it, what you're doing is saying, well, we'll put these signs up and see if that stops people from dying in high impact crashes.
That's what you're going to do if you reduce speed. You're going to go, we'll reduce speed. Let's see if we stop crashes. If not, let's reduce speed more. Let's reduce speed more. So
Well, no.
walk.
So the information that we've got is that accidents happen when accidents happen, if they happen at 100 Ks, it's much more damage, much less likely that you're going to be walking away from it. We've been recommended that in a lot of these roads that we would drop that down to 80 with the idea that
What are you trying to achieve though?
what
What are you trying to achieve?
So,
Zero deaths?
safety on what?
Are you trying to achieve a zero death and zero crash?
I mean, that would be amazing if we could. But
That's-
what I'm trying to say is that it's not measuring it up at population, it's measuring up at the risk that I personally, or you personally, or Pip personally has when they're being approached by an oncoming vehicle and an accident is about to happen. Are you likely to be able to avoid that? Or if you can't avoid that, can you mitigate the damage that's being done to you? And that's the recommendation why we would drop.
That's not why we're doing this though.
It's 100% why we're doing this.
Doing this on a direction from central government to reduce serious and fatal and serious crashes by 40%.
I actually asked that question and Stephen said, no, this is something that the South Upper District Council has to do. And that.
Yeah, within the
Artisan has.
within the road to zero. Guidance is within the road to zero.
So,
40% reduction.
Stefan had a comment he wished to make.
Well, we've run a public consultation process and the public have asked us to exclude, 10, 15 roads. And they've asked us to include for speed reduction around 30 roads. The core decision for this table is whether or not you authorise the reduction of speed on high priority roads. If you're willing to contemplate that, if we want us to go away and let you know what that looks like, then that's one thing. If you don't, if you're rejecting the notion that we reduce speed on high priority roads, then of course we can look at other ways to achieve safer roads. We will be doing that anyway. But the question that has to be grappled with here is whether or not you're going to authorise recommend the reduction of speed on high priority roads or not.
Can I clarify when you say high priority roads, are you talking about the roads that Tim says that he's seen and that he's marked down?
Ones that are listed in the document.
From what I'm reading, the ones that are listed in the document are the ones that have been submitted, like people have come in with. So this is what one person who's travelling that road has said, oh, this is it. So it's been put down as a high priority road?
No, we've listed the high priority roads in the document based on the crash data and the asset condition. And then we've heard submissions from people that have wished to exclude or include on that list. What you would do is say, okay, we're willing to contemplate reduction in speed on high priority roads. Go away, take full account of all of the public submissions, including what we heard in the oral submissions, and come back to us with what you consider to be a sensible reduction, given all you've heard, including all the resistance to a blanket approach, an ideological driven approach, etc. Come back to us with a plan for a speed reduction on the high priority roads. Or you say, no, we're not interested in that at all. We're not interested in speed reduction on roads at present. We may consult on it in the future. We would just like to consider how we make those roads safer through other means. I think that's the distinction.
I think we need to have a look just to make sure that because from how I'm reading this, people have put in that these are the roads that they'd like also included.
Or excluded,
Yeah, or excluded, and some mentioned twice. So some are mentioned to be excluded as well as included.
I guess what I'm saying is if you go away from this meeting today and you haven't made a decision whether to reduce speed on high priority roads, then we probably haven't finished the job. Is that making sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I'm not sure if I entirely agree, but it made perfect sense.
So don't forget, definition of high priority roads as determined by you guys is any road that had 3 or more crashes in the 10-year period. 3 or more deaths and serious injury in the 10-year period. So that's it. So those are the only roads we're considering here.
And sorry, I seem to be missing. So are we saying how many are on that list? When there's been 8 in the last 10 years? Like how many roads have we got on that list for that are considered high priority roads in the South Wairarapa?
Quite a few. They're listed in the document.
And are these ones on there?
That's a better memory than I haven't.
No, I'm just wondering about that, because see, this is the roads suggested for exclusion. So these ones that are listed in the report are additional,
The list of
because I just can't see why
we put forward.
Lake Ferry Road is additional when you would think that Lake Ferry Road would be on there.
Yeah, but then what would happen at the risk of belabouring this? I'm sorry, Chair. What would happen is we would go away and we've got our original list of roads that we classified as high priority roads and we put to you and that puts the public. Then we've got our feedback that we've received, which will further refine and inform what we consider to be the priorities on the network for speed reduction. And that of course includes the asset condition and other information that we've been given by locals. And then we come back to you with a suggested speed management plan, which includes high priority roads. We don't. The only other way of doing it that I can see is that you would end up going through this road by road, which I believe to be an efficient way of doing it.
I think so.
Okay, well, I come back to the question I've asked numerous times. Now, in this, and you go, okay, so there have been 3 crashes or 3 deaths or serious crashes on these, let's call them half a dozen roads, but it doesn't matter how many there are. But of those, how many are speed related? And if you tell me that they were drunk, or they were on their cell phone, or they weren't wearing their seatbelt, or what was the other one was speed. So those are the 4, I think, aren't they? Right? Which speed is the last one. If you tell me that reducing speed, but they're still going to be drunk and they're still going to use their cell phone and they're still going to wear a seatbelt, well, they're breaking 3 laws for a start.
Yeah.
Before they even drive their car down the road.
But I think
But we're not here for that. We're just here for the speed.
No.
you're framing it in the wrong way, because what you're saying is, I think that there is a 0.5, 0.2, but whatever, very, very small chance that I'm going to come in contact with somebody who's doing any of these things. Because I drive these roads all the time. It's never happened. It's not an issue. And, I can point to it and say, oh, there's only been 2 crashes or 3 cats, whatever. So what you're looking at is sort of, the incidence rate. And that's one way of looking at it. But I think if you're not looking at it from incidence rate, if you're assuming that you are involved in an accident, what is the likelihood that you're going to survive that accident? And what can we put in place now that's going to increase your chances of surviving that accident? Because it's all a risk, right? Like, we can tell people to stop using their phones, they'll use their phones. We can tell people not to drink, they'll drink. I get that. There's only so much we can do to change people's behaviours. But if you've got 2 cars that are travelling towards each other at 100 kilometres an hour, or you've got 2 cars that are travelling towards each other at 80 kilometres an hour, your chances of surviving the second accident are higher than surviving the first accident. That's why we're looking at it. So I think it's a total fallacy to say we haven't had enough accidents out here to justify it, because we're looking at a preventative thing.
Yeah, but there's a cost and as Martin said earlier, the cost and benefit and what's the likelihood of this actually occurring. You've got to weigh those into account. Otherwise, we might as well walk.
So
because the only way to stop vehicle accidents is not to have vehicles.
do you think we should ask for?
Can I just come back to the issue of priority roads? So I'm increasingly inclined to the view that I shall move a resolution in a minute that we recommend that Underhill Road and Bucks Road, which incidentally doesn't get a mention in here, but it should have, be reduced to 40k. And I would recommend it for this reason. Firstly, it is discussed in the document and the recommended speed limit is 40 k's per hour. We heard an oral submission on it today, and there are other written submissions in here that also mention it. Now, the question is, are there any other high priority roads, which I don't think Underhill strictly is, but are there any high priority roads where people have expressed a strong view that the speed limit needs to change?
Front of cemeteries,
Is it a high priority road?
Yeah.
Western Lake.
Like,
Western Lake?
Yeah.
So identified in the document and
Right.
Hungaroa, Pelotonga, March Road identified in the document.
That's right. That's right. And that was also discussed.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't think anything else was. And I think in here, there's a general view of leave well alone. But I'm open to being corrected on that.
That's correct.
there's plenty of people.
Underhill Road, what are you talking about?
In this document, it's the Underhill Road that's
On the sports stadium,
on the Featherston side of the road.
all the way down. I might as well go all the way down because it's gravel and it's,
Yes, I'd rather-
I'm walking now and it's,
Gravel roads, all our gravel roads is a separate issue. As a standalone issue, because I think that all our gravel, as I said earlier, you can't drive 100 kilometres on a gravel road safely, no matter what, unless you're possum born, you know, they are not designed for 100 kilometre an hour driving. And yet we have that target on them. What's the safe speed to drive on a gravel road? Or what's 60? Yeah, oh, what's 60?
Now, Martin's Road would be covered by the Martinborough zone, wouldn't it? No,
The broader is 60.
okay,
Those outside of the street identified in the plan here are all supposed at 60.
right, okay. Does that make sense to have 60 there and then potentially 40 a couple of seconds later?
Could I just
Yes.
sort of,
Well, I'd like an answer.
we just slice part of our network off as well.
Yeah.
Might be easier if everybody's of agreement that our 100k on a rural road is just madness. Why don't we just say, let's have an interim and say 70? Make all our gravel roads.
You said rural.
Sorry, I meant gravel roads.
gravel road
Say that.
60.
I meant gravel roads 60.
60.
Um,
Have it at 60 because I think to be able to travel safely with, if you don't know them, I mean, you shouldn't even be going 60.
Well, the recommended
We
speed in
sold
here,
on gravel roads.
Underhill is 40.
Oh, true. Gravel roads wasn't even part of the
We
submission.
asked whether it was in or out. We did.
Yeah, we did ask whether there was in or out. It was a specific question, so it has been consulted on.
And they said, and
Overwhelmingly said no.
leave them out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the recommended in our document, the recommended speed limit for Underhill Road was 40. And
That's in an under.
contemplate the cyclists that are using it, which makes it slightly unique to these sorts of roads,
Well, there's potentially going to be
potentially.
a path. But that's not,
That would be
I mean, there's plans for it. It's
Be awesome if it was on the same side as the pipe underneath that road. That would be
just to
awesome. for
separate the
people could-
cyclists off.
Yeah, walk and trucks couldn't drive over it.
right.
So,
Okay, councillor Gray, how do you want to treat Western Lake Road, which is not gravel?
So I think that's covered in the document that it's going to be down to
60?
60 up to the rail line, is that right? Yeah, which,
Only if we
that's-
recommend it.
yes, well, I'm happy to recommend that.
Yeah, recommend that.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have a recommendation that Western Lake Road be kept at 50 until it reaches the railway line,
60 in the document.
as per the document.
60.
Oh, 60, is it? Sorry, 60, my mistake.
Sorry, can you just, so you want to recommend council to keep the speed on Western Lake Road
At 60
at 60?
kilometres an hour.
Yep.
Until it reaches the railway line.
Reaches the railway.
And this is
Yeah.
assuming that we're not dropping speeds around cemeteries.
Which they're not exclusive, are they? They're mutually exclusive.
No.
Oh, got that.
So Councillor Gray has moved that. I will second it. Okay. Any discussion?
No, I'm okay.
All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Okay, one against, thank you.
Wait, for, this is the one for, the cemetery? Like going from,
Goes back to secretary.
yeah, just through to the crossing?
I'm
I thought you thought it was still under Hill Road.
in favour of reducing these speeds, these high priority roads. I don't see the justification for doing it,
On that one, okay.
or any of these.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
I don't see the justification.
I'm also going to recommend that Underhill and Bucks Road be reduced to 40 as per the document. Do I have a seconder? I don't, so that lapses.
Can we come back to that though?
Can we come back to my then?
Well, it's not usual to come back to things, so.
Yes,
No,
no, but
we'll-
to your thing, still like to address that and actually say it's an action point for our staff to come back
Well,
with a proposal for safety around the sports facility.
yeah, but Underhill Road and Bucks Road are a long way away from the sports facility.
The Hill Road is right.
Under Hill Road.
That's right.
Well, I think it's still Wakefield Road at that point.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Change of
No.
protection.
But nevertheless, there are still kilometres and kilometres of Underhill Road before you get to the end of it.
Yeah, but I've specifically asked for them to come back with safety improvements outside the sports.
Yeah, I'm also interested in safety improvements on the Shingle Road.
No, outside of the
No,
sports field.
Outside.
outside the sports field, which is House Hill.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's good. But in addition to that, I am also concerned about safety on the metal roads, which lead to the bridge, etc. Okay, the last topic I think is in fact metal roads.
So can we come back to the middle? Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
We've come to it
Right, okay.
right now. So do we have a recommendation in relation to metal roads?
Yes, my recommendation is that we do an across the district reduction in speed on middle roads.
Okay, to what?
As an interim, I would probably go 70. I don't know, I'm not a speed expert,
Is this,
do something.
is this number 7? Where the recommendation, the proposals for gravel roads are not included in the draft speed management plan at this time?
Well, we are recommending, we're about to recommend possibly that
The opposite.
they do be included.
But I'd like to get Tim's view on what, what's an interim
Absolutely not.
speed that's, but you think it's probably,
71% of, 68% of submitters said that gravel roads should not be included in the speed route. 27% said they should.
yeah, and I'm also, what sways me is actually probably somebody who drives that road more than anyone else on the submitters, and that's Jenny. And even she said reduce the speed limit on the gravel roads. So that's the people that live out there and drive them every day. And even though we haven't heard it today, Matuna has been on our case forever to reduce the speed on Ruakaka and Matuna and so on. So this,
So if I can just, excuse me,
Hard not to get involved.
Thanks.
the question is, before we settle on 70K, which is what?
60 was in the dock.
Sorry,
60 was in the dock.
60 in the dock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so where would you like to go, Alistair?
look, I've said 70, I think, but I'm open to be persuaded, but I just think as an interim, at least we at least it's signalling what we're doing something. I don't want to be draconian and go that because there are,
You may struggle to second, but however, if you stick to 70.
I'm happy to 70, but if somebody wants to move to amend it, I'm going to stick to 70 as a start.
Okay, do I have a seconder? No, please, do we have a seconder?
I just wanted to clarify before I second it.
Oh, right.
Does that mean we have to go through consultation again if we change the?
No, because we've been out for consultation on metal roads.
Okay.
So yes, we can do this.
So, but we don't have a second.
No, I think.
No, we do not have a second.
You know, second,
Do we have an alternative recommendation?
I think like,
Well, I'll recommend that we reduce metal roads to 60k.
Make the point that
No, once we have a seconder, we can discuss it, but if we don't, we won't. And we don't, so that's that.
Okay, can we
I would be more inclined to go with the 70.
propose for 70 again? That second?
Yeah, I'd be more inclined to go with the 70, just so that's on the metal roads.
Okay, it won't hurt anybody to second it when the opportunity is there, so please stick with us. Okay, any discussion you'd like to?
Given a lot of time, especially.
Oh, look, as I said, I think you can't drive on our metal roads at 100 kilometres. We all know that it's just dangerous. We've heard people that live out on the coast where the most dangerous parts are. But it becomes a target. We've got mainly people now driving on these roads that have never driven on metal roads, probably unless they're coming over for the first time. Populated traffic is increasing all the time. I just think it sends a very strong signal that says, hey, we've got to be careful on our metal roads.
Right.
And it's a speed you probably can drive at, you know.
Right, would you like to add anything, Councillor Maynard?
Yeah, I think like my one trepidation, I guess, is it's more cost wise. So because we do have a lot of gravel roads, and that I don't know how many we have that are intermittent. So where it goes car seal to gravel to car seal again and things like that. If we put this through, is that meaning that we're needing a sign and then another sign, or yeah, so for each time, so how
You have
or
tar seal.
and that just says 70 on gravel, or just like, you know, the car with the
Because you have, remember with car seals, so what could get movement, so buttons to bridges and those sorts
We
of things.
just
So
need
you
to
would
resolve
go,
the con.
oh, you're going over the bridge, you go to 100.
So I'm going to just have an interruption here and introduce a little procedural motion, which is apparently our meeting should have closed a couple of minutes ago. But we can carry on, provided we resolve to carry on. And you second it, all in favour?
Right, we're almost there.
Okay, we're almost there.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, okay.
So can I
Yes, please.
speak to that? My feeling on it is that there is already self-limiting factors to gravel roads, like people can't drive any faster than what they feel comfortable on with it. And when we talk about the cost to put signs out, I don't know that having signs on all the gravel roads is a good use of money either. Like I would rather, one of the main reasons of not dropping speeds down on sealed roads is because of the cost of signs. I don't understand how we can justify that for gravel roads and not sealed roads.
I didn't raise that cost. I didn't raise that as a concern.
No, I'm raising it.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't raise it as a, I thought you were saying to me that one of them was, so I didn't raise it. I don't have a concern about changing speed signs.
Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking, yeah, that was what I was saying about my only trepidation is price.
Yeah, I think it's very sensible to drop the speed limit down, but I think if it's
Just when it's very dark and there's no lighting, sometimes you don't know that you're coming up to gravel.
Okay, anybody else got a comment? Yes, I've got a comment, which is that I will vote against the 70k. I think we either we need a very good reason to not follow the accepted advice. I'm not saying there aren't good reasons either, but I haven't actually heard one, so I'll be a no. You've got one for me?
Well, some of the factors that went into us recommending 60 kilometres on metal roads was that you know that the condition of our metal roads is up and down. It's very subject to what the weather is doing at the time. They're already driven at low speeds because of the difficult nature of some of those roads. It also reflects the fact we have a lot more inexperienced and new drivers on those roads, and also it does extend the life of the road and saves money. So, you know, all of those factors, of course, mitigate 60 or 70. But just to let you know, those are the things that underpin the advice.
Okay, let's put the resolution, and the resolution is that all metal roads become 70k per hour. All in favour, please say aye. Against? No, that's carried. I think that brings us pretty much to the end, Dave. What do you think?
So you're getting rid of that last one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Chair.
I've got the same.
Do we have to resolve the issue? We've only done road.
Yeah. So
Western Lake.
is the intent of the hearings committee that absent the one or two roads, high priority roads that have been changed by the subject of resolution, but no other high priority roads are going to be the focus of the committee at this stage?
That's what I'm assuming the committee is. Yeah.
Is that your intent?
Necessarily,
Well, there's been no resolution to the opposite.
well, I think. Well, I would like to put a resolution
Okay,
in
go.
that we recommend that the officers come back with a report around laying it down, I've lost my words. What was it you were
I
talking
can
about?
help you.
Yes, please.
I think the question is whether you instruct us to take full account of everything that we've heard through the submission process and the guidance that we've received from you to include a certain amount of the, you know, important or significant high priority roads in the draft speed management plan or not. Because at the moment we've only got the, you know, cemetery roads that we've got two or three.
Well, I do have a comment, but I'll wait to see if there is a motion. Is that?
Did you get that, Amy?
I've got some, I'll be honest, I'm tired. I'm lagging here. It kind of basing it off of, it sounds like very much the recommendation that was in the paper.
Yeah, the recommendation of the paper says.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. I
Consider
tweaked it slightly.
officers consider consultation feedback, including the content of oral submissions on high priority roads, both in terms of inclusion and exclusion, and suggest safe speed levels, and report back to council with final advice.
Yes.
You know, you've heard everything we've said.
Yeah.
So you might want to look at
Yeah.
other options for achieving the same thing.
So just that's the question for me, it's just whether we have any other high priority roads.
So councillor Gray's moved that.
I have moved that.
And
Thank you.
do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Would you like to talk to?
No, I've got no more words for the day.
My question
Spend it
is,
all.
what would change? I mean, you've already given us advice on those topics. in my opinion.
Well, we haven't had the opportunity to consider the significant public representations that we've had today properly, and your guidance, and sit down and look at what that looks like on a map, to make sure we've covered all of our bases in terms of the roads people are concentrating on, and where we might be able to draw a consensus round for a speed change. I mean, Tim, what do you think?
There's been no discussion today and very little on submissions with regard to our coastal settlements, which we're all going to drop from either 50 or 100k down to 30k. And these are generally small cul-de-sacs and Maui into of roads there, but your likes of Tamaki Grove, Mangatawi Grove,
So that,
they are just little cul-de-sacs with a few holiday houses on, either currently posted at 50 or 100k. And I think the high usage of those holiday period where there's a lot of pedestrian usage and out of town or not so familiar traffic on the road, we could encompass those into a 30k speed limit without any negative feedback.
So they're not impacting your main arterial road.
They're not.
Yeah, your little cul-de-sacs. Problem with those. But
Would it also give us time to have a bit more of a collaboration with Carterton.
It starts
Yeah.
on roads like Ponassahi Road.
See where they end up in their deliberations.
You've still got the option of, considering that and turning it and turning it off in council, should you decide to do that.
I'd certainly like to see options for avoiding the accidents to begin with as part of the consultation, or part of
Dropping the
part of
speeds.
the solution to them. Because if you avoid the accidents, then the speed becomes relevant.
Speed is never going to be irrelevant in accidents though.
And if you avoid the accident to begin with, it's got safer roads, or you've got,
Okay.
but we can walk. Yeah.
From a budget point of view, we've got budget allocation on the road to zero. $100,000 the last 3 years, and only a portion of that's been spent today, and it's rolled over. So we're probably looking at available funds to purchase the speed signs and any other signage of $200,000 plus. And there's the same $200,000 available for Cape Palliser Road, while that is still cheap funding. As from next financial year, we may lose that subsidy. So any work through there we do this year is zero cost to the community.
That's on the assumption that the road to zero funding continues in the same way that it is presently.
That's no, it's been to this year.
Thank you very much for that.
That's good.
Well, we'd better, have we moved every resolution?
I'm not sure if that was the last one was carried.
Move, councillor
you-
Gray, second, yeah, it was carried.
It wasn't.
Yeah,
That's
indeed
it.
it was.
Yeah, that's it.
Right, okay. So we have come to the end. We'll have a short, brief closing, Karakia. Maybe we won't.
Hang on. We're all like, hang on.
I've got one,
Okay.
You've got one?
You do it.
but my pronunciation is terrible. Would you like?
Okay, here we go.
Oh,
Kia tau, tō rangi Mārie, ki runga e ngā iwi o te ao. Basically says, let's everybody go away peacefully.
And not fight in the car park
And not.
and not drive too fast.
Okay.
Yeah, walk. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.